What's up, gang? Welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazde. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now, listen, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I say, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So, come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazde, and boy, do we have a special guest. My main man, Renee Rodriguez, is in the house. What's up, Renee?
How are you? Great to be here.
Oh, man. I've been looking forward to this show since the second I saw you booked. I was like, this is going to be a badass show. So, man, thank you so much for coming on the show today. For those of you that are new to the show, we're about two things. We're about people who are living their passions and those who are creating greatness in the world and doing so despite the odds. This is a true underdog story when we come in and see people that are going against the grain to build things that are changing the world around us. And my main man, Renee, is now the short of passion or greatness. So I'm so pumped to have you here. Renee, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. It's an honor to be here.
So you don't know this, but we've been swimming in similar waters for a while. I know you're huge in the mortgage space amongst many spaces, but I because of my background in mortgage, having built a very large mortgage business and now working with dozens of mortgage companies, doing some consulting work behind the scenes, you came up on my radar, and it was January of this year. You were asked by a mutual friend of ours, Eddie Perez, to present at his EPMX conference in Atlanta, and I saw that you actually were we shared a stage. I don't know if you knew that, but you and I shared the stage. You did a badass presentation, and then they asked me to teach on core values right after. So we've actually shared a stage, just whether you knew that or not.
Well, now it's actually all coming back to me now because I'm remembering that now. That's awesome.
Yeah, I saw that. So I got to catch a little bit of your talk on the Amplify work that you're doing. Unfortunately, I was on and I wanted to go prepare for my talk, so I didn't get to catch too much of it. But since then, I've seen that you've worked with huge companies like Guild Mortgage, Shayla Gifford's a mutual friend of ours, and so many others. And so I was like, and it's funny, I was talking to Shayla specifically about you right after you and I had breakfast a couple weeks ago, and I said, Renee has a shit ton of momentum right now. She's like, that's exactly the word I use when I describe Renee. So you have a ton of momentum in the world, man. It's really cool to see the work you're doing. So congratulations on all the momentum. It's really an incredible thing to see from the outside looking in.
Thank you. It's only been 28 years in the making, right?
What's it? Adrian Brody, when he won his Oscar, he said, my dad said it takes 13 years to become an overnight success, right? So it's one of these things where people are seeing the end result of a shit ton of work. But I'd love to kind of dive in. In the Greatness Machine, we love to hear a little bit about people's origin stories. What makes them tick? How did they get to where they're getting to? And then I'd love to dive into the work. Before I do go there, though, I do want to give your formal bio. Is that cool if we touch on that? And we'll dive in.
Absolutely.
I got a little carried away. I was so excited about us sharing a stage. I got out of order. So, guys, Renee Rodriguez, badass CEO, keynote speaker. He's considered by many as the leading authority on leadership and influence. Renee is the best-selling author. We're going to be talking about his new Wall Street Journal best-selling book called Amplify. It's Amplify Your Influence. We have it right here. So you got to go out there and get the book. We're talking all about that. He's a leadership advisor and transformational speaking coach. For the last 27 years, Renee has been researching and applying behavioral neuroscience to solve some of the toughest challenges in leadership, sales, and change. So, man, so pumped to dive into that. But, man, take us back. Like I'd love to hear a little bit of the origin story, and then we could talk about the work.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one, thank you. And I'm kind of a weird mix of an eclectic upbringing and eclectic sort of training background. So I was a basketball player my whole life. And so I played, my whole dream was to be a pro basketball player. There's no possible way that's going to happen, but I dreamed it, And I played as if, and I practiced as if, and got a chance to win a state championship in college, or excuse me, in high school. And it was one of those things that, I didn't have any success until probably my sophomore year in high school. It was one of those I never got any playing time, and finally started getting better and better, and went off to college and got cut my sophomore year in college. So here I was, not knowing what to do, and thinking that, I didn't know what else to do. I hated school, but I got a chance to ask a CEO one question. I said, what do I have to do to be in your shoes when I get older? And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, you learn how to sell. If you learn how to sell, you'll always be employed. And at 18 years old, I'm just a coachable kid. I had more energy and discipline and nowhere to put it. Didn't like school. So I said, okay, I'm going to go sell. I don't even really know what that means. So I get this thing in the mail that said I've been selected because of my GPA to join this fast-paced sales and marketing company in the health and wellness industry. So I said, sales and marketing. Okay, so there's my sales job. Health and wellness, I love to work out. So this is perfect. And I show up and it's this mass recruiting to sell cookware door to door. Now, I had to get into college. I was part of a probationary program with all the other minority kids. And my first summer, I had to work as a janitor, cleaning up cigarette butts and clean toilets. And that was sort of our way. And I made more money that summer I never made. It was like $937. And I had it all in once. I mean, I looked at that every day. It was like, I've never seen so much money ever. And when they came out and they're doing the recruiting, the guy said his first summer, he made $9,000.
Wow.
And I'd never, to fathom $9,000 was like, what? And all I could think about was, it's like basketball disappeared from me. And all I could think about was, I will do what this man says. And my interview went like this. I said, I'll do what you say when you say to do it with no questions asked. And he looks at me, kind of smiles. And you and I both know, like, imagine a kid coming up to you right now and saying that for you. You'd be like, this kid, I'm going to hire him for anything. That's all I was. I was just a coachable kid, probably because I didn't have a dad. So I always I had my daddy issues. I wanted him to approve of me, that kind of shit. But
right.
Either way, it served me well because I was the last guy to make a sale because my mom was out of town. As soon as she came in town, she bought the sympathy set. And, it was expensive, $2,500 a set. So I learned how to sell a difficult idea, which was a new lifestyle. Instead of spending $50 on cookware, you're going to spend $2,500. Right. That required every aspect of true sales professionalism, presentation, price building, objection handling, you name it. It had to cover everything. And so at 18 years old, I just was hooked. That first sale made, I'm like, 10 presentations, I sell 3. That means let me get 10 in as quickly as I can. That's all I could think about. And I'd failed so much in basketball that rejection didn't matter. I've been rejected my whole life. It was normal for me to be rejected, but to have an opportunity to get some feedback, like 3 out of 10 was great. And so I just did that, became number 5, United States, Canada, Mexico at 18 years old. And I was like, all right, screw basketball. They screwed me over, but sales, no one's going to cut me if I sell. And so at my core, I'm a salesperson that went to school, got a degree in behavioral neuroscience. I went to school for a change management consulting firm that dealt with massive scale culture change using brain research as sort of the foundation. And so I learned the training process and massive group facilitation. We were doing 55 workshops a month all over the country and creating transformations in places that weren't supposed to be, that were hostile work environments. 80% African-American lumber mill that was, had the KKK was the union. And so it was like that kind of stuff. We'd turn it around. And so the process of me being a salesperson, somebody learning about change and behavior change and working with leadership teams, all of it came to sort of a head when I started realizing, what is this all about? Sales is more than just selling. Leadership is more than just, what's the central idea here? Well, one of them was the brain and understanding the neuroscience of what's going on. But then the other side of it too was it's more than that. It's about influence. And Maxwell said it best: there's no leadership without influence. In selling, there's no sales without influence. And so to me, my passion really honed in on the art and the science of influence.
Oh, I love that, man. So can I ask you 2 questions?
Please.
Question number one. Was that cookware company called Cutco?
So Cutco made our knives. It was Salad Master. That was actually the company that Zig Ziglar worked for 17 years.
Oh, okay. Because I have a whole shtick around Cutco. I call it the Cutco Mafia. So it sounds like that was part of there's. I kid you not. I've had probably a dozen guests on this show that started from Cutco, because for whatever reason, man, they have the people that decide to go, and it comes down to this. My former business partner, I call it PSD, poor, smart, and driven. Someone that's willing to get off their ass and go knock on someone's door they don't know, or figure out a way to not have to knock on doors to sell people cutlery at a high end, is someone that's poor, smart, and driven. Because rich kids don't do that shit. Rich kids don't do that shit. I worked at the White House. And I've had PSD jobs my whole life, but I worked at the White House. Those kids, that's where those kids go. They get summer internships because their mommy and daddy, donated to the Clinton administration, and they get to go sit in the Oval Office. So, but the PSDs, that's for whatever reason, it forms a lot of badasses, and you're definitely one of them. Did you see that when
PSD, you're? That's good.
Yeah, PSD.
Oh, yeah. I think there's a beauty. There's a beauty in overcoming something and not having something. And I think, the bigger piece is that I don't think happiness is the goal in life at all. I think utility is. And because most of life is a struggle, most of life is suffering. Most of life is hard. I worked out twice already today. Both workouts sucked, but I'm so glad I did. And as I was doing it, I'm so glad that I did, even though it was suffering, even though it was painful. Fainted almost during one of them, pushed myself through it, had to move things around just to make sure, but I'm glad I did it. The things that we do, the knocking on doors is suffering. Getting rejected is suffering. Going and training for something is suffering. Saying no to the crap food is suffering. Most of the things in life, most of life is suffering. But if you suffer for purpose, at the end, you become useful. And if you're useful, you can serve. And so if I can be of service, now all of a sudden there's the goal. And so we talk about being poor. When you don't have it, there's a sense of suffering that I think is critical. And in the beginning, I used to try to shelter my kids from suffering. Now I'm like, no, go out and go suffer over something. But you have to reframe suffering. It's like not suffering and agony and you're crying and there's nothing. No. Go work hard over something. That builds it, I think.
Yeah, Dalio calls that the struggle. The people yearn to struggle well, right? And so it's this idea of struggling well that I think you're touching on, and I love this idea of suffering for something you care about. And we talk about that's living a life of purpose, right? And you look at the greatest leaders of all time; they struggled for a cause, right? Whether we're talking about MLK or we're talking about Gandhi, and those are obviously world-renowned examples, but I love what you're touching on here. I want to go to influence, right? Now, first of all, the book, man, this is no small feat. Wall Street Journal bestseller, no small feat. I mean, I wrote a book, busted my ass, and did not make that list. I got the Amazon bestseller, which I worked hard for, but dude, no small feat. So huge congrats there. And I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier that, you got a lot of momentum, 28 years in the making, but in your book, you define influence, and I'd love for you to talk about this.
Well, a lot of people will say, why even influence? And so the best way to understand influence is to understand its opposite. So imagine walking in a room and no one notices. You tell a joke and no one laughs. You sell a product, no one buys. You cast a vision and no one follows. It's a feeling of sadness, a feeling of insignificance. And I say, play that out. Like literally anything you do has no impact on the world. How are you feeling? It's the beginnings of depression. It's the beginnings of wondering why I'm on this earth. Where am I going? And so I said, okay, so what's the opposite of that? Okay, I walk in a room and people take notice. I tell a joke, people laugh. I sell a product, people buy. I cast a vision and people start following. Now all of a sudden, I feel like I matter. I have significance. Why? Because I'm able to create impact. And so when we think about the purpose of influence, it's so much more than persuasion. It's about finding your mark in the world. Where do I belong? Where can I improve? Where can I impact the world around me? How can I do X and I see Y with the cause and effect, so that like I have significance. Not I'm significant, but I have some level of significance. And if I can do that towards something that means something to me in alignment with my values, now it's a life of purpose. But if I see my purpose and every time I try to do it, I fail, and like nobody's even paying attention, it's one of the worst of the human experiences. And conversely, influence, I believe, is one of the greatest of human experiences. to be able to have an impact on something. And so when we talk about impact from business, apply it. That's why I say it applies to anybody, teachers, police, sales professionals, leaders. It applies in every aspect. We all have ideas that we want to share, but if no one's acting on them, or even worse, not even paying attention first, because we got to capture attention in today's world, then we got to get them to act on it. Those two pieces, if we can't do that, it doesn't matter. And so influence is the piece that I think every single human being needs to take that front and center as part of their toolbox to study and to hold tight.
Oh, I love that, man. It's so interesting. I just thought of two different things. So first of all, you made a great point, which is, I'm living my calling. I'm living my purpose. I'm self-actualizing. I'm at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm putting out all this content, doing this work, and no one gives a shit. It's like super deflating. I've had this example happen to me a bit where I'm like, man, this is my best stuff. I'm like, this is 20 years in the making and no one gives a shit. And I never thought of it from the stance of like, oh, well, it's because you haven't figured out the influence side, which is how do I take this idea, which I'm being told I'm a genius about, and bring it into a distribution content where people pay attention and get that value. And I had a friend that said, that's the tragedy, is that people don't learn from it. You're taking from the world as an influence. I see from what you just said is that is the conduit to amplify that influence. So what you're talking about, I guess, is some of the, in the book you refer to the 3 Ps. Tell us a little bit about that.
So the 3 Ps, to me, at the core of influence as well, right? Because it's a lot of times we think of influence as an offensive strategy. What am I going to say? Like, how am I acting? What am I going to do to impose influence on you? But in reality, influence begins with how do you get the audience ready to do this? Is the audience even ready to hear my message? And the concept is, would you plant a seed in cement? The answer is no, it makes no sense. But our ideas are seeds, and we plant them in cement people all the time that aren't ready to hear. They're too defensive, or their interests lie somewhere else, so they don't even understand what it means to them. And so they're there and just not ready for an idea. And so there's a whole sequence of things. I've been in so many meetings with people that, one, if they don't know who I am, or what I mean by it's not who am I, but they don't know who I am in the context of things. So there's no relevancy. And I will just stay silent until we find a relevant moment that it makes sense, because it just doesn't make sense. And if I go out of my way to say, well, here's who I am, no, that's doesn't make any sense either. It doesn't help the sequence. But so the 3 Ps are predict, preempt, prevent. So if I can predict a behavior in somebody, well, we do this with executives all the time. They're about to implement a change. We're doing some messaging for a big meeting. Let's say they're doing layoffs, and one of them wants to tell a story about how they were laid off one time and they were okay. And I said, okay, let's play that one out. Like we said, well, I'm relating to them. I said, well, here's my prediction is that if you're telling a story of how you were laid off, I'm going, they're preparing us to lay us off. Okay. So if we can predict the behavior, what do I have to do to preempt it in order to prevent it? And usually if I predict resistance of some sort, what can I do to preempt it? And sometimes that's a reframe before it starts. Or maybe it's a switch of story. Maybe that's not the right story. Because maybe I say, okay, maybe I shouldn't do that. Okay, let's get to a higher level. What do you want people to be? Well, we want them to take ownership over their scenario. Okay, so then you as a leader, how do you display that in your opening? How do you display ownership? Well, I want people to talk about how they're feeling. Okay, great. How do you create an open environment for that? Because right now I can predict that they're not open to that. So we got to preempt that, and we got to get them open. Best way, maybe it's you begin. And maybe we choose 3 people that you already know are your cohorts. And you have a prior conversation. Say, hey, I need you to really open up, and I want you to feel free sharing. I'm going to call on you 3 first. So you create a momentum of people modeling the behavior. And so then we've preempted and prevented the resistance response. And so it takes that sense of strategy into the influence world of saying, how do I do this? But before I enter it, what am I walking into? How are people feeling about me? Is my credibility in a good place? Do I have a reputation at stake here? Did I do something in the past that might have hurt them? Or do they have negative history? If you're dating somebody and you're saying, okay, well, maybe they assume they were cheated on, so they're going to probably assume you're cheating too. And so, okay, how do I preempt that next time? And so looking at predict, preempt, prevent is one of the basic, most important places to start when it comes to influence.
I love that. It's funny that you're just talking about this idea of ego, right? When someone comes into the room and using yourself as an example, that to hold back right before and find that moment where I can create influence by holding back the ego, having some discipline around the ego. What are your thoughts on this? Is just a kind of off the wall question. I had an experience 4 years ago. I actually did a podcast on this where I was in a room. I got invited to hang out with Elon Musk, and it was me, Elon Musk, his brother, Christopher Nolan's brother, this guy, Jonah Nolan, his wife, they're the creators of Westworld, and my friend who was the agent for the Westworld couple. And I'm sitting there and my ego is just like stabbing me like the whole time because how do you how do you introduce yourself in a circle like that? What do you talk about? They know who they are. And so you just had me thinking about that right now with what you said. Like, what are your thoughts if you're in an environment where you're rubbing shoulders with some people that are influential and they know who they are, and like, how would you, like, using some of this formula, your amplify formula, some of these ideas around influence, how would you approach a situation like that?
When we think about like celebrities and how to deal with them, so I have some certain rules. One is, like, I'll never really go up to a celebrity in a environment that's up in the open, unless there's somebody that I really admire, and I'll begin with what I admire. And so let's say, but it sounds like if you were in a closed room with them, so just by definition, you've been pre-selected as somebody as a peer, right? Now, if that room was, let's say, 300 people, then you're not a peer, you're a fan, right? At that point. But if you're in a small room of people with that group, then you have to accept the reality that you are now guilty by association through the concept called pre-selection. Pre-selection is an old anthropological term. And it's like somebody who sees somebody with, an attractive female, then all the other attractive females see the male differently because, well, she's a high valued female. She selected him. There must be something high value about him. It works in networking too. And so to me, it's like, okay, so how do I engage in a conversation like that? One, you read the room. What are they talking about? Do they even want to? If it was Elon Musk, the first thing that most authentically comes to me, I said, Mr. Musk, I have to ask you a question. I use your example all the time. One of the things I admire about you is that you don't rush your answers. You actually take time to think. Is that something that you're consciously doing? Did you learn that somewhere? Because I think so many leaders today just spout about the mouth. They don't think. What are your thoughts on that? And so I might challenge him with something like that, because that would be the question I would want to ask, because I see him, he just sits there and he thinks before he answers. And it's so powerful how he does it. But that's how I begin that conversation, And so, but I look at the scenario that I'm in. Am I in a peer environment? Because if I'm not meeting somebody as a peer, I don't want to meet him as a fan, because I already know that sales process, that sales cycle is a long one, and they've already bucketed me into that. So I refuse to jump into that category. So I give you an example. I met Ed Milet. We spoke at an event together recently. And of course, everybody wants to talk to him, and he killed the event. He just brought down the house. It was so powerful. And so I'm going, okay, I'd like to connect with him because we've got some mutual friends, and they were like, you really got to connect with Ed. So, that's great. He doesn't know that, right? I know that, but he doesn't. So he walks in and everyone's crowding around him. I don't. Just let him have his space. Let everybody else ask the questions. I watch and observe. And that after about an hour and a half back, behind stage, he's backstage and he's talking to one or two people, one of the hosts of the event. And I'm like, you know what? I grab my book and I walk over. Now, where's our connection? We're both published by the same author, published by the same publisher, both Wiley. And so I walk up to him and I said, you scared the shit out of me, and smiled at him. He goes, why is that? And he goes, oh, you're published Wiley too? Because I'm holding my book. I said, yeah, I thought you were coming out the same week I was. I said, you were the week after me. So, you scared me. I said, I knew I still got number 2, but I wasn't even going to be close if you were there, because he took number 1 on everything. He goes, oh man. Right. He goes, yeah, we couldn't even get New York Times. He went through this whole thing. And now we started this conversation as a peer. And so to me, it was finding that place of where was the peer conversation. That's a concept we call ethos, right? Your credibility and your character. And how do I approach that as a peer environment? And also I make sure that it was a short conversation. I didn't want it to be long, because I know that everybody is pulling on his time. And then I responded. I said, hey, I got 2 friends. Ben Newman's a good friend of yours. I said, I've just recently gotten to meet him. He's blown my mind. He said that you and I should connect. You probably get a lot of these. Would you like me to mail this to you, or do you want to take it with you? He goes, oh, this is awesome. He goes, I'd love to have it. Would you mind mailing it to me? And I said, great. I'll get the info from Ben. And he's good. Hey, pleasure meeting you. Good luck out there. And it was out. It was only just, a 3-minute conversation, 4 minutes. But to me, that was the respectful way of doing it, but also a way of saying, I'm not just a fan.
Yeah, man. I've literally, you just answered a 4-year-long question for me. And I've asked multiple people this. I said, what happens when you walk into a room where everyone knows you know who they are and you're brought in as a peer, and everyone gives me these bullshit answers? And I was like, I'm not doing that. Or they have something where that's like almost like, well, I always ask famous people this one question. I'm like, no, that's not authentic. That's not who I am as a human being. But literally the way you just framed that was so perfect. I literally, you answered a 4-year-long question for me. Thank you so much.
Cool. Awesome.
So you are touching on, in your book, you talk about this Aristotle's rhetorical triangle of logos, pathos, and ethos. Like, why do you think people need to understand these to gain maximum influence? Talk a little bit about what these are and how we use them.
So 2,000 years ago, Aristotle was the first person to talk about argumentative thought. And to me, I said at the core, I'm a salesperson. Even deeper at the core, I'm a philosopher. And the reason I'm is because I'm constantly thinking about these ideas. I'm constantly running scenarios. I'm constantly looking at, asking myself, am I doing this? Is this the right thing? And, going through all the stuff. My schooling, jaded me in a good way, I guess. But he was the first person to talk about argumentative thought. And he said that he's got this thing called the rhetorical triangle, which is really like a 3-legged stool. That if you want to be persuasive and create an argument, not to be argumentative, but to create an argument for something, a case, if you will, you have to have these 3 things. And the first one was ethos. Ethos is your credibility. It's your character. And the best way to understand ethos is its opposite. Like if I were to do a course on how to grow rich and thick hair, nobody would show up. Right? If you're listening to this, I don't have any hair. I'm bald. Or if I would do a course on the menstrual cycle and the challenges that women go through, and women look at me like, what? Why are you talking about this? Well, I've never had a menstrual cycle, so I should probably not be talking about it. It's the out of shape trainer telling you how to lose weight. It's the person who's broke telling you how to make money. They don't have any ethos. And so I assess everything through, do I have the ethos to talk about it? Does the person giving me advice have the ethos to talk about it? And I can sense false ethos, right? The social media coach that has 230 followers and they can't get their videos to hit, but they're going to show me how to do it. And I was telling him, I said, before you advise me, get more followers than me, get a better engagement than me, and then I'm going to listen. It's not because of an ego, by the way. It's my standard. If I haven't done something, I'm not going to consult you on it. I'm just not. It's not ethical. Right. And you may have ideas. Well, I know how it works. Well, clearly you don't. I know how to post things too. I've heard ideas of hooks. That doesn't mean I understand a hook. There's people who understand hooks. There are people that talk about hooks. Very big difference. And so there's an ethos play, and you can buy some false ethos. I mean, like having a follower, we started a new program, and in 2 weeks, we got one video that hit 2.3 million. Another one hit 670,000 videos. Another one's 100 and some thousand. So we're starting to hit, and I'm getting everybody asking me, Renee, can you coach me on social media? And I'm like, no, I'm still new. Now I've been trying this for 5 years. So I can tell you, I'm probably more qualified than these social media coaches because I've tried so many and I've spent so much money on these videos, and then we finally found a formula that works and a team that works. But I'm not going to do it yet. Give me some time on this because I want to develop my ethos in there. And so that's what ethos is. And so a doctor tells you to lose weight. You might listen to the doctor because they have ethos, but you might say, okay, doc, thank you. I'll start next week. Well, why not start now? Well, because a lot of doctors don't have pathos, which would be the emotional connection. The emotional appeal. They didn't emotionally connect to you. There's no passion behind it. And so in a presentation, you might have ethos. You carry yourself well and everything, but you are very boring. Dr. So-and-so that's going to talk about it. There's no pathos in the presentation. There's no storytelling. There's no oratory. I didn't capture what's going on. You're not painting a picture with your words. You didn't trigger any emotion. So pathos is really what drives behavior. And the last one is logos, which is the logical appeal. It's got to make logical sense. If I don't, you might have ethos and pathos where I trust you and I can't wait to act, but you don't have a plan. Well, I always say exactly, imagine telling kids about Disney World for the first time. Imagine this magical kingdom where all your favorite characters come to life and these roller coasters that are bigger than anything you've seen and candy and everything. And they're like, oh my God, yes, let's go. Where is it? And I'm like, I don't know when or I don't even know where it is. The kids are like,
It's in my
What?
brain.
Yeah. Like just a buzzkill, because there was no logos. There's no plan. There's no logic behind it. You see logos a lot in sorry, network marketers, if you're listening, in network marketing, where, you might get somebody who's a doctor, quote unquote, a chiropractor doctor or whatever it is. And they endorse a product that is, you have to drink this juice from a river in Africa. It's sourced by, but it's hidden ingredients, proprietary blend. So if I drink this juice, then I'll magically get X. What? I'm not sure I'm understanding. It's like there's this question for me. It's got to be logical. Now, if you can make it a logical sense in your doctor and it's there, I'll follow. But you got to have all three. So any stool without one of the legs starts to fall over. And so that's the concept between two. Now there's a hidden two that that most people don't even know exist. It's kairos and telos. Okay. Kairos comes from the Greek, from the word chronology. It's about timeliness of a message. And there's an era that we're in, what we call zeitgeist. So right now we're in a very, very interesting era where our words really matter. 15 years ago, I did a talk and I was in a plane crash, a small one. But it was still a crash. And I said, the stewardess came running up down the aisle. She was bleeding from the face, and I had to calm her down. And this great story. And these two young ladies came up to me afterwards. Renee, is one of the greatest talks I've ever heard. But you lost us at stewardess. We're flight attendants. And they turned around.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh,
and at first I'm like, oh, is that all they got out of it? But then I thought, hold on a second. No, I didn't grow with the times. I wasn't up to speed with kairos. And so right now, whether you believe or agree, it doesn't matter. You're speaking and influencing into an audience, and you have to understand their words, their language, and the triggers that might pull, the emotional triggers that might trigger, if you will. And so we have to understand kairos. And then, of course, telos is literal Greek for end. It's the purpose of your talk. If you're not clear on your telos, where you're going, you begin to ramble. And so it's like if you say, hey, walk. Okay, you practice where? What if I just say walk? It's like people saying, well, I'm going to speak. Okay, about what? For what purpose? Most people don't even ask for what purpose. They just speak and tell stories, and they go up there and they don't know where they're going. And it's such a common thing that happens, and then people lose sight of it, and they begin to ramble, and their brain goes, oh, God, I don't know where I'm going. Well, let me keep making noise with my mouth until I figure it out. And they go, shoot, I'm rambling. I don't know where I'm going. Well, buy yourself more time. Ramble some more. And you got to have those if you want to stay in touch. So ethos, logos, pathos, kairos.
I love it, man. We lose your
telos.
sound.
No, I hit the button accidentally.
So let me ask you a question. I mean, this obviously for a person, you've spent a couple decades working on this and honing your craft and really studying, both historically, how do you create influence, and then neurologically, how you create influence. And for someone like myself, who, I'm a trained leader, I'm a conscious capitalist, trained conscious leader. A lot of this stuff is resonating for me, but even I'm sitting here thinking, man, what do I do with all this? How do I apply this? Because this seems like a lot just from a philosophical standpoint, but I'm assuming that you've also figured out a way of how do I take this to market, if you will, so that leaders can apply this, salespeople can apply this, anyone that wants to create influence can apply this in a meaningful way. Walk us through how you've done that through the work that you're doing right now.
When you say, okay, can I ask you to expand on apply in a meaningful way? Because I want to make sure I answer that, because I love your question, but I want to make sure I'm getting that one.
Yeah, it's, look, someone's listening to the show, we're 33 minutes into this show, and they're like, man, this guy's blowing my mind, but this just seems like, how do I even use this? I get how he might use it because he's trying to get 2.3 million views on one of his videos on TikTok or Instagram. And I get how an influencer or a speaker might be able to really take this, but most people aren't speakers and influencers. Most people are leaders in a business, or most people have a job where they're trying to get promoted, or they're just trying to have a more intentional life. And so let's say I'm a student that reads your book that says, man, this is cool. How do I, first of all, I guess go get the book, right? But putting that aside, when you start to think of how can you distill all these different pieces of information into the formula, how have you decided that you can help people with this information?
Got it. So I think that what we've talked about so far are the surrounding theories and aspects and concepts that are critical to understand how we're talking about influence. And those are pieces that help you in our instrumental, because I can teach you the sequence: frame, message, tie down. Frame something, deliver the message, and then tie it down. But there's so much more to it than just those pieces for true mastery. And so the application comes in what we call the amplify formula. The amplify formula is 3 steps. It's setting the frame, right? It's making sure that people frame up the idea and then delivering a message. So framing is basically, if you think about frames are constructs of reality. Frames are the filters by which we understand the world around us. And so, for example, if I were to say this profession, tell me what word comes to mind. Used car salesman.
Scummy,
right? And so I've asked that thousands of people, and it's always scummy, sleazy, whatever it is. So what you did is you pulled from your past experience or your past frame of reference, and you bring that to the current to construct this scummy sleaze bag in front of you as a used car salesman. And so that would be speaking out of sequence, because it's not how the brain works. And so we want to speak in how the brain works. And the brain needs a frame first to understand the stuff in front of us. And so if I don't provide you a frame, your brain will provide one for me. And so if you think about that from that, and that feeling you just had right there, right? Did you go cold a little bit? Like what happened to Renee? And if you're listening to this, why was that pause? Make sure you don't edit it out.
No, was that intentional?
It was totally intentional.
Oh man, I was like, it's not on my side. What's up, Renee? So wait, so you froze it? We lost you for 2 seconds?
I just stopped talking. I was still blinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but look at what your brain did, right? So that a pause in that narrative creates stress, and your brain doesn't like stress. And so it has to alleviate the stress through assumption. And that's an assumption, and it's pulling a frame to help understand it. It's also pulling a narrative at that point, right? Like, okay, is it on my, must be on my end. There must be a technical glitch. There's an assumption. Nope, I just paused. Right. And so, and I gave you a clue by blinking, right? But still, it was like, it didn't make any sense because it had no frame of reference there, right?
I was so confused while you were blinking. My brain exploded, man. So, I saw you blink. That was the moment where I was like, "What the fuck is going on?"
But let's drive the lesson from that. That's a narrative gap, right? And we can talk about narrative gaps in a little bit. But I always do that to show people how the brain works. Is that it didn't like that moment. It didn't like it. If you're listening to this, you're like, "Well, what happened?" And if you were listening, maybe you weren't paying attention, and you started to pay attention because nothing was happening. But the brain doesn't like that gap of information, so it has to race to fill it. And the question is, what is it filling it with? And I don't like the crapshoot of waiting for my audience to fill the gaps of the missing frames that I didn't provide. And so what we talk about is making sure that you frame everything that you're talking about first. So what I just use is what I would call a gestalt frame. I create an experience to talk about a theory. I bring it to life. And so I collect gestalt framing exercises like I would collect Michael Jordan rookies. More valuable than a Michael Jordan rookie to me. Just that little exercise. Because now you won't question me because I gave you the experience of it. I didn't just theoretically talk. Oh yeah, it's interesting. I can conceptualize. No, you felt it. And if you're listening to it, you felt it. And so I use that as a frame to then deliver a message, which would be our brains don't like missing frames. And if we don't provide one, your brain will provide one for you. And the last step will be the tie down. And what that means to you is if you speak without a frame, you're leaving your message interpretation to chance. And that's not a good thing to do in leadership. And that's not a good thing to do in sales, because most people will pull from something that doesn't serve you. It serves to protect them. And if they've had a negative experience with this in the past, they're going to pull from that negative experience. They're going to pull it from what we call negativity bias. We are designed to be negative for purposes of survival, not because we're pessimists. And so it's normal. You wake in caveman days, you wake up in the morning, you don't stretch. Oh, what a good night's sleep. Oh man, look at the birds chirping. No, you wake up, you go, are there any bears, tigers, lions? Right? My kid's still there? Good. Did they take my food? You look around, you listen. You're looking for the negative, not because he's a pessimist. He wants to survive. some crackle, twigs breaks. You look over here. You don't go, oh, twig broke. Must have been some natural cause. No, what in the hell was that? And will it kill me? So we still have negativity bias. That's why the media is having a heyday with any negative information. Politicians in politics, heyday with negative information, constantly doing it. And so why? Because it captures attention. And if you can capture attention, you can deliver a message. So that's, if you think about, there's so many application pieces, but they have to understand framing, delivering strong messages, and tying it down, which answers the question of what this means to you is. It's ensuring that the message is understood to the specific value need of the listener.
Oh man, you do this. First of all, you're blowing my mind. Number one. Number two, your timing and my timing are like in sync. Because my next question was, how do you feel about leveraging one's values in your work around influencing others? And we segued right into that. And how can someone more effectively do that? I'm a core value evangelist. If I'm tying it together from a values perspective, what value do they get? How does that align to their values? But if people are approaching the influence, or if they're approaching decision making or persuasion, or persuading the people they lead, or trying to be persuading someone who's leading them, how can they leverage values to do that in a more effective way?
So we do an exercise when in our workshop where, so I'll bring somebody up on stage and I'll say, I'll say, who are you? What do you do? What makes you unique? And now I'm going to set you up for failure. I'm asking 3 questions. They laugh. I'm like, who are you? What do you do? What makes you unique? And they go, my name is so-and-so and I do this. And what makes me unique is this. And I'm like, great. How do you feel about that answer? Was that like an amazing answer? And they're like, no, it sucked. I'm like, yeah. I said, good. So be honest with it. It sucked. It was okay. It's not going to help you. I said, so let's change that. Let me ask you a different question. What makes you unique? And I draw a little mind map. I just put the word unique and I draw a circle around it. I said, give me 3 to 5 things. Like, for example, Darius, what makes you unique? Give me 3 words.
Funny, core values, pizza.
But what makes you unique? So, because you've done the work, so actually, you wouldn't be a good example because you've done this. You're a pro at this. So I would ask somebody that question. I'm going to use a fictitious person. One I did yesterday, and it came back as service, caring, and what was the next one? It was around creativity. And I said, okay. I said, now let me ask you the next question. I said, do these 3 things represent your core values in some way? And they look at them, they go, yeah, they do. And I said, I've done core values work for 28 years. I have spent days, weeks, months helping people uncover their values. And if you ask somebody what their values are, they either look at deer in the headlights or they go, oh my God, how long did it take? I said, what I came to find out, if I ask you what makes you unique, I get those words in seconds.
Yeah.
And the reason I get them is because the end result, we want to live our values and we live them through our uniqueness. And uniqueness really is also a semantic way of getting at what we're proud of and how we want to be seen. We want to be seen and identified through our values. And so it's a sort of a backdoor hack to get at the values. And I say, okay, so now if those are your values, the science says that those are formed between the ages of 9 and 13. And so I then ask the question and then solidify by age 21. And I say, so and I go, which of those 3 speaks to your heart? And he goes, creative. Now, this is a war vet, by the way. And he said, creative. I said, great. I said, so the 2 questions I asked, who was around and what happened between ages 9 and 13 around the word creative? But I'm looking for one of 2 stories. Either a lighthouse story, that someone was a beacon of light of creativity. Like, man, they were just that. You wanted to follow them. They were that beacon of light. Or we look for the foghorn, the warning sign. You needed creativity and you didn't get it. And he looks at me and he smiles. He goes, just points and he goes, foghorn. I said, great. He goes, my adoptive parents. I said, tell us about your adoptive parents. He said, well, unfortunately, I didn't have very good parents. They had a father who was abusive, went through this whole thing. But I found that if I was just creative, I could fill in all the gaps of what they didn't need, or they didn't provide me. I could go out there and I could talk to my friends, my best friend's parents, and he could be the father figure I needed. And I can get the consoling and nurturing from, another friend's mother who loved to cook. And, she would do that. They'd always invite me over. If I was creative, I could always find the solutions I needed that they weren't ready to provide. And I smiled at him and I said, okay. And so I said, and you said you picked service too and caring. He said, yeah. I said, I'm going to take a wild guess. is that your current business right now, you love to be creative. And it's really not just creative, resourceful with them. And he smiles, yeah, resourceful in servicing. And he said, going above and beyond for your clients and caring about them in a way that you never had. Is that right? And he gets a tear in his eye and goes, that's exactly it. I said, now watch this. I said, tell me, we went through the process and I said, somebody asks you, who are you? What do you do? What makes you unique? You don't say your name. You don't answer those three questions anymore. You start with this, with the story, the frame. Unfortunately, I was adopted as a child, and so there's great adoption stories, and there's some tragic ones. That's probably on more of the tragic side. I had two parents that really didn't want me there. They were focused on a different child, and as difficult as that was, what I found was the missing pieces that they didn't give me. If I was just creative, and I took responsibility and was resourceful, I could find the solutions and the pieces that they didn't have for me. And so I got it from my friends' parents. I got it from coaches in sports. And then ultimately I found it in the military. I went to military at a young age, and I realized that my happiness came through service. And in the military, going above and beyond the call of duty was seen as the greatest thing that you could do. And so to me, the things that I learned were to be really creative in my approaches to things, to take ownership over what happened and always go above and beyond. And so when I decided to become a real estate agent, I realized that I could take those same values that I had in the military that were formed from some of the difficult pieces and bring them to an industry that needed people to be resourceful and creative and to always go above and beyond an industry that nobody went above and beyond. They did the minimum to get by. But I could stand out and create a very unique business and create amazing relationships by going above and beyond the call of duty, if you will, in the service environment. And so that's what makes me unique. And so now we turned his personal values by uncovering his origin story between the ages of 9 and 13 to change the sequence, to start from a frame first to then work our way out of that. And so that's the Amplify formula. That's what we outline in the book. That's what our course teaches. And that's sort of the life's discovery of the process.
I love that so much, man, because what I just heard, just while listening to that, first and foremost, when I was my former business, I grew a pretty sizable business. I used to teach core purpose because we had a core purpose at our company, and we were a mortgage lender and servicer, big mortgage lender and servicer, hundreds of thousands of loans we serviced. And I used to ask people, I'd say, when you were this first day of their job, I would teach their onboarding for 20, 25 employees. And I'd say, when you were 10 years old, what do you want to be? And they'd say baseball player, soccer player, teacher, doctor, actor, actress, and I'd say, I noticed none of you said you want to be in the mortgage business. And they'd all laugh. I get a quick laugh out of it. And what I find is that most people don't get to end up in those sexy businesses, but they could still live a life of purpose, to your point, which is this person, the way you frame that story, the way you frame that story for that gentleman that went from this really tough upbringing to going to the military, and what that meant to him. What I heard there was the values told the story, but were a tool that could be used to foundationally amplify, for lack of a better word, the truth of why he's doing what he's doing now. Because had he just said to me, like, I listened to the whole thing and I said, he just told me I'm a realtor, I would have been like, he would have the same experience I had the first 15 years of my experience in the mortgage industry, which was eyes glaze over, no one gives a fuck, move on, right? But it's that story, to your point, that framing of the story that makes such the difference. And like your work, man, I mean, this is, I got to spend a little bit of time with you with Isaac Stegman for breakfast and got to really hear some of your work. And I've heard you talk a little bit, but man, this is some really powerful stuff in today's age, because to your point, words matter so much right now, people. And I think that we're reaching a renaissance right now where people are trying to reconnect with authenticity.
Yeah.
How do you, I guess my question for you, and we're running out of time here, so I want to end on this question is, what are your thoughts on, there's so much noise out there in the world, whether you're talking about social media or traditional media, and people are fronting and trying to fake and trying to pretend like there's something, and then they're bringing it into the workplace too. And so I believe that there's this moment in time. We have a moment in time right now. We're at this crossroad where you can either choose to give into the bullshit or you can choose to be more authentic. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and how you believe your work can help make that come to life in a more meaningful way.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think, how do we be more authentic in a world that is almost rewarding in authenticity, right?
Totally.
It's
Totally.
hard because, and I fight that battle every day. And, our businesses depend on attention, and our value proposition needs to capture attention in a very noisy world, in a world that has a battle for our attention. Billions and billions are being spent to capture a swipe, a like, anything. And what I tell people is authenticity requires no preparation. So let's remember that. Well, I had to prepare to be authentic, or just speak on exactly what you're feeling. And so then there's that side of it, is the permission side, because it takes courage to be authentic, truly authentic. Because usually sometimes authenticity is vulnerable. And the true superpower in all of this is vulnerability. But it's also the scariest thing to do. We live in such a you go first society. We want people to be vulnerable, but you go first. I want people to lead by example, take ownership, but why don't you take ownership first? And the true leader is the one that doesn't do that. And you watch in the groups that the moment one person decides to tell the vulnerable story, the whole audience just fucking, like the burden is, okay, we can actually share this now. The world wants it. The world wants more meaning and more connection. And we are the media. That means if you don't like what you're seeing in the media, that means you're consuming it. That means somehow you're consuming it, because we create this monster through our attention. You don't like something, then starve it. Starve it of your attention. And that takes massive discipline, because they're triggering on every biological and neurological trigger we have to be able to capture that. But you got to fight. You got to be stronger than that. And being authentic now, first, courage to be authentic. Then second, strategy, sequencing. Like I had to learn that you can't just post authentic things on social media and expect people to pay attention. There's a formula to it. There is a formula. And when I kept hearing the formula, I hated it. I rebelled against it because it didn't feel authentic, felt manufactured. And then I started questioning, and I went to them and I said, I want to find a way to do this authentically and ethically. I don't want to get clickbait. I don't want to do these things. I want to do something from the heart. I'd rather take a 3 to 5 year approach than try to do this overnight. And the good news is I found some good people that loved that, believed in the work, and they were smart on how to do it. And we were able to find that formula that still stays authentic to my message. But I think that still we need to continue the innovation process. And how do we do that? We have to innovate within authenticity. How do I capture your attention so that you can actually pay attention to what's going on? And the funniest thing, my favorite posts that I make are the ones that get the least play, the ones that are the deepest, and the ones that I think are the most profound, the ones that get the least play. And that's the challenge in today's world, that people want something very simple and easily digestible and snackable. And you even watch kids' shows. They're editing the space on kids' shows, so it's constant words moving, because the kids can't handle a pause. And I think these TV shows are destroying the attention spans of our kids. It's just crazy. The same way you'd edit a video to move out of the dead space, they're doing it on TV now. It's horrible. But
wow,
you know what? I also sound like my parents sometimes, so I got to understand what that means. How do I innovate within it? How do I play ball in an ethical way within it? And so authenticity should not be negotiable. It doesn't take preparation. It just takes courage.
And what a great show.
Thanks.
Like this I whenever I have super high expectations for a show, and then of course most of the time the people are so amazing like yourself that they get exceeded. You just exceeded my expectations, and this was such a treat to spend time with you. I'm looking forward to getting to know you more as time goes on, and I'm so thankful to have gotten to get to spend this time with you. So thank you so much, man, for sharing your wisdom.
Man. Thank you.
Yeah, this is really cool.
I love the work you're doing with values, by the way. I love what you're doing with values, because taking it to an organization and rolling it out the way you do is so unique and so needed, man. So the honor is mine as well. Thank you.
Oh, guys, thank you. Mutual love going on here. Amplify your influence. Renee Rodriguez. Where can they find you? Where can they hit you up? You're all over the place. So just give them the rigmarole of where they can hook up with you, and we will promote the hell out of this thing.
Yeah, meetrenee.com is probably the best one. MEET, and not MEAT, MEET, Renee, RENE.com. I don't know where MEAT will take you.
And then social, you have some really cool social. Is it where can they hook you up with on social?
See Renee Speak on Instagram is the best one. All my socials are See Renee Speak. SEE Renee RENE Speak.
Guys, you heard it here. Go check out Renee. Go check if you get the chance. And I've had a lot of friends that have done a lot of work with you. They're like, you're blowing people's minds left and right. So we have a lot of CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business people that listen to the show. You need to go check out Renee's stuff. And if you get the opportunity, go do the work with him on Amplify. I'm so excited for the work you're doing, my friend.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Guys, peace out. We love you. Talk until next time. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on, so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers, and after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. Appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.